Hi everybody, this is Paul Cooper with Totes and Notes, and I'm bringing you a market meltdown, and it's currently January 13th, Sunday, and we're going to go over a few articles here, talk about the markets and what's been going on and what we are kind of forecasting or expecting for this year. This first article is from Zero Hedge, and it's "The world economy is reaching growth limits, expect low oil prices and financial turbulence." This is a pretty in-depth article. I really enjoyed it. We're only going to scratch the surface because there's a lot to it. I highly suggest that if you have the time to go back and read it. It also links to some books. I think it was written during in the 1970s. Let's kind of forecast some of the things that are slowly coming to terms and at least the concepts. But if you can look at this graph here, it was kind of a long-term prediction of what they thought was going to happen with some demographics in the economy as a whole. Reaching peak oil, peak production, peak demographic growth, and then kind of births and everything are slowing down, and how that would affect the economy. Like I said, this really goes into depth, talks about the significance of Trump's tariffs, the nature of the world economy and the growth, and talks about the debt bubble. So it covers a lot, and the growing use of resources. You know, it even talks about cell phones at some point when you reach max production, and what kind of happens there, and the inadequate supply of energy that we now have in most of the world, and how that's going to affect us. So I really like this article. Again, it's really in depth. If you have the time, I highly suggest you go read it, and may even break it up and just read little sections of it. But it's really good. Some good graphs. A lot of theoretical stuff, but basically everything points to 2019 being a fairly turbulent year in economic markets. This article is a lot easier to go through. It's talking about the economic breakdown. Starts in East Asia due to collapse in births and childbearing populations. And really, the title says it all. When they refer to East Asia, I believe they're talking about China, Japan, Korea, mainly. Taiwan and Mongolia. And so if you followed it at all, Japan has a terrible demographics right now. People over there, for whatever reason, just are not having children, and their population's going to collapse. I mean, it's very possible in the next couple hundred years that there's not going to be very many, if any, full-blooded Japanese people anymore, because their population is collapsing so rapidly and so hard. And that's kind of interesting, and it's talking about how in China, with they had the one child policy for so long, that's negatively affecting now. And now they've got parts of China where, since for whatever reason everyone wanted to have boys instead of girls, there are now parts of China where there are literally no marriageable age females because it's all men or old ladies, and so now. Some rich Chinese people are now bringing in women from other Asian countries to marry them there, and paying their families quite a bit of money for that, I guess, privilege or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, it's just, and population and demographic problems like that, they're pretty hard to fix. You could tell people, hey, go have more children and everything, but even if everyone listens and does it, it takes some time to really correct it. So it's one of those things. Once you get below, I think it's 2.1, I believe, is the replacement rate, because unfortunately you have to count on not everyone's going to live to adulthood, as sad as that is. So you need at least 2.1 generally as a replacement rate, and there are certain parts of Japan and China where it's like 1.3, 1.4 and below, so which is just a huge problem. And so this just talks about that a little bit, and what does that mean when you have no young people for your country? If we were to apply that to the U.S. right now, if we had we're pretty soon in the next few years, you're going to have all the baby boomers retiring, and so that's a lot of people on Social Security and the medical system that are now generally no longer working or only working part-time. And so you basically need an army of people underneath them that are younger to support that, to continue to pay into those systems. And that's why the demographics are so important, just from an economic reason. And then you get housing. If the next generation's smaller than the current one, well, now you have all this real estate that you need to fill up. So what is everyone going to go out and buy 1.25 homes or 1.5 homes? So it can affect housing values. They'll start to collapse if there's more supply than demand. That's what's naturally going to happen. So, just interesting little article and how it can apply to stuff. If you're really concerned about it, and you want to have kids, maybe it's a good time to have kids. But unfortunately, these problems aren't going to. They're going to be a generational issue. It's going to be really hard for one generation to just come back and fix the problem. It's going to span generations more than likely. This last article on Zero Hedge is soaring restaurant prices signal inflation is much higher than official data suggests. I think I've kind of hinted at it. I don't think I've ever called just straight shenanigans or bullshit, but I think we all know that the government, and when I say the government, it's not just ours, it's pretty much around the world. Whenever they're putting out inflation numbers, they're always, even if they're bad, they're always nicer than what they probably really are. It seems like each couple of years, they go back to modify the inflation number and what goes into it and the index, and every year they're removing stuff from it but not adding stuff to it. So I think they've removed oil prices and heating and utilities. So it's they massage it to look like what they want. It's like, oh yeah, we got to hit that magic 2% inflation each year, and most people know that it's significantly higher. You have stealth inflation through things like the packaging of your food or whatever you're buying. It's that unit is the same price, but the unit's actually smaller. So instead of buying a 4-ounce candy bar, it's now 3.6 ounces per candy bar, and things like that. And so they slowly, because people are usually more price adverse. So you see that Snickers bar go from 99 cents to $150. That's a pretty big jump. But if they can we can shave off like a third of the product practically without people really noticing, then they can do it that way, and people are like, oh, it's still 99 cents. That's why these stupid dollar stores do so well. There's a psychological deal. It's like, oh, I'm only paying $1 or $2 for my item. Well, yeah, you are, but what you're buying is a lesser product. It's either garbage or you're buying less of that product. So, those stores do well psychologically, but if you actually look at it, you're getting hosed. It doesn't make sense. And then, I don't think it's in here, but then there's the popular Big Mac inflation index you can look at. That's always, you can Google that, and it'll show you the Big Mac inflation index from large major cities around the world, and it tells you how much a Big Mac costs there, and so you can kind of see which cities are more expensive, which parts of the world are more expensive, and then it'll also compare it, year over year, what the price is doing. So we're basically just talking about inflation, and it's good, and we all know it's going up, but the government's going to tell you it's 2%, and we all know that's not true, and we all know that our wages aren't keeping up with it, and mine certainly aren't, because I'm not getting paid right now because the government's in stupid shutdown. But it's nuts. So it just makes it really important that you have a grasp of that concept, and that hey, your wages may not be increasing, but your expenses are going to be increasing year over year. So what are you going to do about it? You're going to try to save more money and cut out expenses. You're going to try to invest in stuff. It's just something you need to be mindful of. Alright, we're now over at housingwire.com, and our first article here is just talking about how, time to say goodbye to a rate hike possibilities in 2019. We had a few little increases last year. So the main thing is the main takeaway, at least in my opinion, is the Fed stupidly kept rates at zero, effectively at zero for years. And when you do that, you can't lower it. What are you going to do? Start paying people? I guess we could do negative rates. And then, we slowly started to increase rates, which is good, but the problem is now that the economy's starting to turn, they're probably not going to raise rates anymore in fear that it's going to make it worse. But they're still so low that what can we do? We could reduce them back down to zero. So they've kind of painted themselves into a corner as far as what they can do to help the economy. And then the other problem is they only think that raising and lowering the rates can really help the economy. They don't go out there and try to actually help people make smarter decisions and come up with any type of regulations. Of course, that's not necessarily the Fed's job, but just the federal government in general, and then the Fed Bank, while not part of the federal government, even though it's got Fed in the name, gets to control our money for some reason, so that's cool. But if you've ever heard of Peter Schiff, he talks about this quite a bit. You know, I don't if you have heard about him, you may not like him or whatever, but he's put out bajillions of videos, and yeah, bajillion's the real number. He does a ton of videos on the Fed. He's going to push you on gold and silver quite a bit, which, you know, if you want to invest in that, great. If not, just ignore that part and listen to his reasons behind it and what the federal government is doing and why we're probably going to have a really bad cycle here and why it's going to be even worse than the last time is because the last time, you know, they did a bailout, inflate the bubble back up, and this time there's really probably no way they can do that. And even if they could, then you just keep kicking the can down the road and making it worse. All right, so our next article on Housing Wire is the Democrats' move to prevent foreclosures, evictions on unpaid federal workers. Thanks, Democrats. You know, this seems nice and everything, but you know, if the government in general would just get their shit together and get some type of budget passed, we wouldn't even have to worry about this. You know, if they can, because it's the 13th. If they can get this sorted out before the end of the month, before people start missing mortgage payments and rent, it should be a non-issue. Yeah, you know, maybe people don't have cash for incidentals and for food and stuff right now. They're having to live on credit, which sucks. But, you know, if the government would just get their act together just a little bit and pass a budget and get it done by the end of the month, then this would be a non-issue. So here's hoping to that. But let's not be naive here. Our government's, you know, it's pretty dysfunctional. So who knows what's going to happen. All right, our next article is from DS News here. And it's the FHA's new loan limits for the year. So that's the First Time Homeowners Association or Administration. Administration's limits. So people that are getting either their first home or they haven't used this in so many years, they can apply for it, get decent rates as long as they meet certain standards and without having like a full 20% down payment. So it's kind of a good program because it's nice. It helps promote home ownership, but then the problem is it's enabling some people that probably aren't ready or shouldn't own a home. But let's try to guess what the limit is, because, you know, unless you're from Southern California or maybe, you know, Manhattan, these numbers should seem pretty crazy to you. So the loan limit ceiling for a first-time homeowner loan grew from $679,650 to $726,525, and those are the high-cost areas. So, not, you know, if you're in Pueblo, Colorado, Kansas City, you know, somewhere in the Midwest, you're not going to get that limit. Those limits are for the high-income not for the high-income, the high-expense areas, and it adjusts based on your zip code what the limit will be. So yeah, people in San Diego, that's probably targeting them, San Francisco, places like that. And so it's pretty dang high. What does that mean? I mean, it just means that people are getting some really expensive homes, and they have access to the money, and with the real estate market starting to turn, you're going to have some new homeowners that are really going to be upside down their homes quickly, and then it's made even worse if you're in a really expensive area like this, especially on the coast. Luxury real estate in the U.S. has just taken a beating the past couple months. which is generally always the first bit of real estate that starts to turn, and it'll be the first bit of real estate that will come back once the economy turns. So what you do is you look at luxury and you look at the coasts, and condos generally turn pretty quickly to one way or the other. So yeah, what you do is you look at New York, expensive parts of Florida, and then you look at San Francisco, Seattle, and Southern California. And when you see that stuff start to really take a dive, then that's generally a pretty good indicator that the economy's starting to turn down. And then after it, after all the damage has been done, once you see that stuff start to rise, usually, not always, but usually it's a pretty good signal that things are starting to stabilize and come back, because the people that have money are starting to believe, hey, maybe all these luxuries are worth it again. And so this is just real brief little article talking about the FHA and the new loan limits. And so if you never knew what that program was and you never heard about it before, hopefully you learned a little bit. All right, for our last article from DS News, we're talking about mortgage-backed securities, and they are back in a huge way. So ended 2018 with an increase of 63% more mortgage-backed securities over 2017. So yeah, they're back. We've talked about all these garbage loans that people are writing, the non-prime loans, which is just the new subprime. It's the new term. Someone like, oh, you can get a loan 2 days or a day out of bankruptcy. Are you kidding me? With like a 500 credit score and above, nothing down. Like $500, you're basically, as a small fee to get into a place. So, it's back. It's basically just a replay of The Big Short, except some of the terms have changed, because it's now non-prime instead of subprime. So, hopefully, none of you are invested. If you are invested, hopefully you've got a long-term short on it, because they are pumping out this garbage again. So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. We're already seeing things starting to turn. Is it going to be hard this year, next year, the year after? Who knows? But it's going to be bad. So, and I'm not your financial advisor. I'm not your attorney or anything like that. I don't know your situation. But depending on what markets you're in, this may be a good time, if you have some profits, to maybe take some of those profits and then set some money to the side for some other more stable investments, or just don't have it invested right now, because at least if you're sitting on cash, I think cash this year returned like 1.9% or something like that. So it's funny, if you'd sat in cash this year, a lot of people would be better off than if they'd been in the markets. So, well, it sucks that if you're just in cash, you're really not making any money, and you're actually probably losing money due to inflation. That's, don't let the fear of missing out on gains put you into some bad investments, stuff you don't understand, or stuff that's probably not stable, because virtually everything's overpriced right now. And so you really need to be careful, and hope if you have some advisors, you really talk about that with them, and hopefully they're very prudent and they can help you navigate the next couple of years well, because everyone gets afraid of missing out. They hear that story, oh, my buddy made 30%, or they made, however many 100% on Bitcoin, but then that's down now. So don't let the fear of missing out on the gains put you into a bad investment, because, having a 2% gain in a year is a lot better than losing 30%, which was really common. People were losing 30, 50% on their portfolios during the last turn down, recession, depression, whatever you want to call it. That's really hard to come back from, because it's like, oh, well, I lost 50%, but then once we finally got out of it, I gained 30%, so I'm almost back where I went. No, you're not, because you lost, if you had $100 and you lost 50%, you went down to $50. 30% of $50 isn't the 50% of $100. So, people look at percentages as solid numbers, but they're not. It's a percentage. So when you have less now, 50% of a smaller number is smaller than 50% of a larger number. So hopefully that makes sense. So you got to really be careful. And that's why protecting yourself from losses is so important. So don't let your friends and other people sucker you in, like, oh yeah, I made this amount of money. Well, how much did they lose when things went bad? Because that's really the more important number. That's everything for this market meltdown. Hopefully we're probably going to start doing these more regularly again, almost every week. And I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any topics you'd like me to cover, please let me know. And thanks for your time.